Hand over your guns now or we'll call real cops. That's what they barked at me in my own garage, puffing their chests like they just stepped off some low-budget TV set. I've been through war zones, I've buried brothers overseas, and now I'm supposed to tremble because a few neighborhood punks in knockoff uniforms say so? I couldn't help but laugh. Halloween came early, and these kids thought paper badges and toy radios made them lawmen. The nerve of it, strutting around like they had any authority over me, like I'd just roll over and let them take what generations of my family fought to keep safe. Tell me in the comments, would you have played along or called their bluff? The moment I saw these clowns step onto my property, something felt off. Their uniforms looked official at first glance, but years of military training taught me to spot details. The fabric was too thin, the emblems caught sunlight wrong, and the way they walked, pure civilian swagger trying to play soldier. My garage door was wide open, morning sun streaming across my workbench where everything was organized with military precision. "Sir, we're here regarding neighborhood safety regulations," the tallest one announced, flashing his insignia like he was auditioning for a cop show. "I'm Troy Bennett with HOA Security Enforcement." His voice carried that forced authority you hear from mall security guards trying to sound important. The other two flanked him perfectly, clipboards ready, comms crackling with what sounded like police chatter, but felt completely wrong to my trained ears. I crossed my arms and studied their setup more carefully. Tools hung in perfect rows along my garage walls. My gun safe stood against the far wall, federal compliance seals clearly visible. These guys were eyeing it like sharks circling wounded prey. The whole scene felt like amateur hour trying to pass for professional law enforcement. Something about their positioning, their equipment, their entire presentation screamed bogus power to anyone with real military experience. HOA, Security Enforcement? I kept my voice level and controlled. Never heard of that department before. The middle guy, shorter with nervous energy radiating from every movement, started reading from official-looking papers. Something about Firearms Investigation Authority under subdivision regulations. The third one, built like a linebacker but moving like a civilian, spoke into his comm device using codes that sounded almost right but not quite, but then recognition wavered like heat on asphalt. That tall one. Where had I seen that face? I blinked twice, afraid my memory was playing tricks. Somewhere recent and completely civilian. The commercial, Bennett's Bargain Beds. That cheesy jingle about where dreams come true for the whole family. This phony officer was selling mattresses on television just last month, doing that ridiculous dance with the oversized pillow. "Hold up," I said, stepping closer to get a better look at his face. "Aren't you the guy from that furniture commercial? Bennett's Bargain Beds, where dreams come true?" I watched his face transform as recognition dawned on him. The color drained from his skin faster than water through a storm drain. His confident posture crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. His partners exchanged panicked glances like deer caught in headlights. One minute he was Officer Authority with his chest puffed out. The next he was Troy Bennett, the mattress salesman caught playing dress-up in his garage masquerade show. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Troy stammered, but his voice lost all that practiced authority he'd been projecting. The nervous guy kept shuffling his forged papers, trying desperately to maintain the charade. The linebacker was still talking into his handset, but now it sounded desperate rather than official. "Boys, that uniform material is thinner than a beer can," I said, examining their gear more closely and letting my amusement show. "Did you get these insignias from a cereal box promotion?" The metal felt hollow, cheap, trembling like paper foil. Real shields carry weight, substance, and authority. These were stage props pretending to pass for the real thing. Even the stitching on their uniforms looked like something from a Halloween store. Troy's desperation was showing now like sweat through cheap fabric. "Sir, you need to cooperate with our investigation immediately," he insisted, gesturing toward my gun safe like he had any authority whatsoever to touch it. Neighborhood protection requires proper firearms documentation and compliance. His partners moved closer, trying to use intimidation through positioning, but they looked more like mall security guards than real law enforcement officers. That's when I activated my phone's camera and started recording everything for evidence. 3, 2, 1. Military protocol activated. My army training kicked in completely and automatically. In Afghanistan, counterfeit authority could get you killed in a heartbeat. These amateurs were using the same intimidation playbook, just with different outfits and civilian targets instead of hostile foreign actors trying to infiltrate our operations. "Step away from my property immediately," I commanded, positioning myself between them and my belongings with military precision. Years of command presence training steadied my stance, though my hand trembled once. "You have zero legitimacy here or anywhere else." My USARMY command shirt wasn't just clothing anymore. It was a statement of real service versus their theatrical performance. The difference between authentic jurisdiction and costume fraud was becoming crystal clear to everyone watching. The nervous guy with the clipboard was sweating profusely now, like he was running a marathon. His falsified documentation was shaking in his hands like leaves in a windstorm. "Sir, these are official HOA enforcement papers," he tried desperately, but his voice cracked on every single word. The credibility was draining out of their entire operation like air from a punctured tire. Their confidence was evaporating faster than morning dew in the Texas sun. Troy tried one last desperate play to salvage his collapsing operation. "Backup units are en route to this location. You're obstructing official duties," he declared, but his voice cracked like a teenager trying to sound tough. His phony bravado was completely shattered now. The commercial actor was showing through the sham officer facade like bad makeup running in the rain. The jingle was probably playing in his head right about now. "Call your backup then," I said calmly, continuing to record everything for evidence and legal protection. "I'm documenting this whole theater production for posterity. Let's see how your supervisor feels about furniture salesman playing police officer." The linebacker had given up on his silent calm completely. The absurdity was overwhelming. 3 grown men playing dress-up, trying to intimidate a military veteran with knockoff insignias and bogus chatter from a toy store. From the driveway, I heard Diane's voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. "If you won't cooperate with our security team, I'm calling the real police to report an armed threat to our neighborhood," she announced dramatically. She stood there with her arms crossed, righteous indignation radiating from every pore of her being. Her performance was almost as theatrical as her sham security team's pathetic attempt at law enforcement impersonation. "Perfect," I replied, never breaking eye contact with Troy the mattress salesman. "Make that call. When real officers get here, we'll see who the actual criminals are." Within minutes of Diane's threat, my driveway transformed into some kind of twisted neighborhood stage production. Neighbors appeared from every direction, many clutching cell phones, all looking concerned. Some carried identical signs reading "Safety First" in the same handwriting, same crooked spacing, professional staging, amateur execution. Diane positioned herself at the center of this manufactured crisis, phone pressed to her ear. 911, I need immediate assistance. We have an armed veteran threatening residents' well-being." Her voice carried that dramatic tremor people use when they want to sound terrified but aren't really scared. I watched this performance with growing amazement. The woman was actually filing a false police report right in front of witnesses. "Ma'am, I haven't threatened anyone," I called out, making sure my voice carried to the gathering crowd. Several neighbors looked uncertain, glancing between Diane and me. "He's brandished weapons at local families," Diane continued into her phone, pointing dramatically toward my garage. "Our security personnel need immediate backup." Troy and his masquerade crew tried to look official again, positioning themselves around my property like they owned the place. But here's where it got really interesting. Diane pulled out her phone and started showing people a clip. "Look at this reel," she announced to the crowd. "Him cleaning his weapons yesterday, threatening our peaceful block." I stepped closer to see what she was showing them. The recording showed me maintaining my firearms in my garage, but something was off. The angles twisted it so I looked like aiming outside. Clever manipulation, but clumsy work. Anyone watching close could see the seams between frames. "That's some creative editing there, Diane," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hollywood would be proud of that special effects work." Several neighbors were squinting at the phone screen, trying to reconcile the footage with their actual memories of yesterday afternoon. Mrs. Patterson from next door stepped closer to examine the reel. "Wait, is that yesterday? I was gardening all afternoon. I never saw anything threatening." Her confused expression was priceless. Other neighbors started murmuring, comparing their memories to Diane's theatrical production. Troy stepped forward, trying to regain control of his collapsing operation. "Ma'am, we need to establish a perimeter for everyone's protection." He started directing neighbors to move back, using those fancy hand signals you see in action movies. The linebacker was nodding seriously, playing along with the enforcement theater. Neighborhood Tragedy Edition, I muttered, taking photos of the obvious staging. Look at those signs. Same handwriting, same crooked spacing. Did you make these last night, Diane? She shot me a look that could melt steel, but several neighbors were starting to notice the details I was pointing out. Young Tommy from down the street raised his hand like he was in school. His mother kept him close, but the kid was curious. Diane Carter, my mom says we moved here because it was safe. Are we not safe anymore? The kid's genuine concern made my chest tighten. These people were scaring children with their fabricated crisis. We're perfectly safe, I told Tommy directly, crouching down to his level, though my chest tightened. Some adults are just playing pretend right now. Diane's face flushed red at my dismissive tone. Her carefully constructed emergency was crumbling under basic scrutiny from an 8-year-old's innocent questions. The nervous imposter was still shuffling his papers, but now he looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Sir, these are official forms, he stammered, holding up sheets that probably came from a printer 5 minutes ago. The sweat stains under his arms were becoming visible through the thin uniform fabric. Official paperwork from what authority? I asked, stepping closer. What department issued these? What supervisor signed off? His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No answers, just more prop pages that wouldn't survive 5 minutes of real scrutiny. Troy tried to redirect attention back to his bogus command. We're establishing a crime scene perimeter. He gestured grandly toward my property. Citizens need to maintain safe distance for their protection. But his voice lacked conviction now. The commercial actor was showing through his sham officer performance again. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who'd lived here for decades, spoke up from the crowd. Young man, what crime exactly? Grant's been nothing but helpful since he moved in. Several other neighbors nodded agreement. Diane's manufactured consensus was fragmenting under questioning from people who actually knew me. He's creating an unsafe environment with military weapons, Diane declared, her voice rising to dramatic heights. This neighborhood demands absolute protection from all gun violence. Her extremist position was showing now. No compromise, no middle ground, just total elimination of constitutional rights. I couldn't help but shake my head at the absurdity. Diane, legal gun ownership isn't creating danger, but filing false police reports definitely is. The crowd murmured at this revelation. Some were taking pictures now, documenting the theater for themselves. The linebacker imposter was speaking into his dead handset again. Base, we need immediate backup. Static nothing. I tuned my emergency scanner to various frequencies, letting everyone hear the silence. Real cops answer their radios, folks. These guys are broadcasting to nobody. A neighbor I didn't recognize well stepped forward. Ma'am, I called the HOA office this morning about a different issue. They said they don't have any security enforcement division. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Diane's fabricated authority was being questioned from multiple directions now. That video editing is really something, I continued, addressing the crowd directly. Notice how the timestamps don't match? And that lighting shift between shots? Professional trickery, amateur execution. Several neighbors were looking more closely at their phones, beginning to see the deception. As police sirens grew louder in the distance, Diane smiled triumphantly. Now we'll see who the real criminal is. Her confidence was unshakable, built on absolute certainty that her false reports would vindicate her theatrical production. Perfect timing, I replied calmly, continuing to record everything. Now we get some actual legitimacy out here, instead of furniture commercial actors. Troy winced at my reminder of his real profession. The approaching sirens meant truth was about to crash into theater, and I was ready for that collision. The police cruiser pulled into my driveway with that distinctive weight only genuine law enforcement carries. Officer Morrison stepped out, and I immediately recognized something familiar in his bearing. The way he surveyed the scene, the controlled movement, the assessment posture. This man had military training. Troy and his disguise crew immediately approached the officer like they were fellow law enforcement. Officer, we've secured the scene, Troy announced with renewed false confidence. Suspect has been uncooperative with our investigation. The audacity was breathtaking. These amateurs thought they could fool an actual cop. Officer Morrison's eyes swept the crowd, then focused on the counterfeit emblems and uniforms. Something wasn't right, and his trained instincts were picking up on it immediately. Hold on, he said, raising his hand to stop Troy's approach. Let me see some identification. Morrison's eyes narrowed at my Army command shirt. For a tense moment, his hand hovered near his holster, suspicion cutting sharp. Then recognition softened his voice. Sergeant Major? That single question carried years of shared understanding between veterans who had served their country. That's right, officer, I replied, though my throat felt dry before credibility finally came with legitimate military connection. And these gentlemen aren't who they're pretending to be. I gestured toward Troy's team, whose sham credentials were about to crumble under professional scrutiny. Troy tried to maintain his charade with growing desperation. Officer Morrison, we're conducting official HOA security enforcement. He held out his forged insignia with what remained of his confidence. Neighborhood protection requires proper firearms investigation. The nervous energy was showing through his performance now. Officer Morrison lowered the phone slowly, his expression sharpening with controlled gravitas. Ma'am, fabricated video presented as law is serious business. His tone cut through the tension like steel. This isn't about protecting families. It's about manufacturing fear. He turned deliberately toward the crowd, voice rising. Who here actually witnessed threatening behavior yesterday? Hands stayed lowered, silence damning Diane more than any emblem ever could. I've been trying to tell everyone, I said calmly. That tall one was in a furniture commercial last month. Bennett's Bargain Beds. Troy's face went pale again as his civilian identity was exposed to legitimate scrutiny. The commercial jingle was probably playing in his head right about now. The linebacker imposter tried to keep the charade going with increasing desperation. Officer, we have special investigative clearance through county contract. But when Morrison asked for paperwork, supervisor contact information, or departmental validation, they had nothing but stuttering excuses and sweaty palms. Officer Morrison, I continued, I spotted the impersonation immediately. Wrong emblem design, civilian-grade equipment, improper comms protocols. These aren't cops, they're actors in disguise. My military training had prepared me to recognize bogus authority, and now real jurisdiction was validating my assessment. Morrison pressed his shoulder mic, requesting immediate escalation. Sharp responses crackled back from dispatch, confirming federal contact en route. This is how authentic command functions, he announced, turning the moment into a lesson. Authentication, chain of command, accountability. Not staged chatter, not theatrical posturing. His words carried finality, the neighbors absorbing every syllable like law etched in stone. Diane stepped forward with renewed desperation, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Officer, this man is threatening our residents' safety. Our security team documented his dangerous behavior. She waved the same manipulated clip she had shown the neighbors earlier, confident it would support her false narrative. Morrison gave it the briefest glance, his veteran instincts cutting straight through the trick. Ma'am, this is clearly routine firearm maintenance. Nothing here is remotely threatening, his tone slicing Diane's claim like a blade through fabric. He's creating an unsafe environment, Diane insisted, her extremist position becoming clearer with each statement. This neighborhood demands complete protection from all gun violence. Her absolute stance was showing now, no compromise or middle ground whatsoever. Officer Morrison turned back to Troy's team with increasing command. Let me make this simple. Show me your department contact information, supervisor names, and legal authorization for this presence. The silence was deafening. They had stage props, not legitimate credentials. Funny how they can't answer basic validation questions, I observed, maintaining my recording. Real law enforcement doesn't mind supervisor calls. In fact, they welcome checks. The imposters were trapped between their exposed charade and approaching legal consequences. Troy made one last desperate attempt to salvage his operation. Officer, we have special clearance through private security contract. But Morrison's professional experience was cutting through every excuse. Private security had specific limitations, and impersonating police officers was federal crime territory. Private security cannot impersonate law enforcement, Morrison explained to the crowd. These insignias, uniforms, and radio equipment are designed to deceive civilians into believing they're police officers. That's a federal crime. The crowd was watching this exchange with growing understanding. Their neighbor's theatrical emergency was being dissected by professional command. The staging was obvious now, the manipulation exposed, the false claims crumbling under scrutiny. Morrison's comms crackled with genuine police communications. Dispatch, I need a detective and federal contact for possible civil rights violations. The pretenders exchanged panicked glances. Their charade was about to become a criminal investigation with serious consequences. "That's Detective Walsh's area," Morrison explained to me privately. "Civil rights violations involving counterfeit law enforcement." His professional knowledge was expanding this situation beyond local theater into federal crime territory. Troy was sweating profusely now, his furniture salesman identity completely exposed. His team was backing away from the property, realizing their impersonation had legal consequences they hadn't considered. Playing cop had seemed clever until real cops arrived. "Officer Morrison," I said, feeling professional vindication, "I appreciate genuine command recognizing the difference between legitimate and phony insignias." The veteran connection had provided instant credibility and professional respect that couldn't be manufactured. Morrison nodded with understanding and growing concern. "Sergeant Major, your assessment was completely accurate. These men committed serious crimes today." The bogus authority was demolished, the real investigation was beginning, and justice was finally taking shape. As Morrison placed Troy's team under investigation, he asked Diane the crucial question that would determine her fate. "Ma'am, did you hire these men knowing they would impersonate police officers?" Detective Walsh arrived with the kind of mobile command unit that meant serious federal business was about to unfold. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute anymore, or simple property disagreement. Federal agencies were taking active interest, proof tables were being set up with professional efficiency, and my simple property dispute was rapidly becoming a criminal inquiry with national implications. "Mr. Hayes," Detective Walsh introduced herself with professional efficiency and federal authority, "we need to understand exactly what happened here, today, and in the weeks leading up to this confrontation." Her setup included digital forensics equipment, financial tracing tools, and the kind of interagency coordination that suggested this case was significantly bigger than anyone initially realized. Within hours of intensive review, the findings uncovered shocking details about the plot against me that went far beyond simple neighborhood harassment. Diane's computer showed months of late-night searches, endless tabs on eliminating firearms from residential areas, and researching police-style security companies. The planning wasn't spontaneous fear or reasonable safety concerns. "Mr. Hayes, she researched you extensively before you even moved here," Detective Walsh explained, showing me the computer records with professional concern. "Google searches include how to remove old soldiers from neighborhoods and removing military veterans from communities," she continued, revealing the methodical nature of the targeting. The deliberate focus was systematic, precise, and deeply disturbing. Forensic analysis uncovered the chilling depth of Diane's obsessive planning and ideological extremism. Search histories included absolute safety zones, free from all gun violence, creating firearm-free residential communities, and eliminating military weapons from suburban areas completely. This wasn't reasonable safety concern or normal community caution. This was ideological extremism with dangerous implications. The financial logs were equally damning and revealed the monetary motivation behind the rights abuse. Bank statements showed Troy had paid Diane $3,000 up front, with additional monthly payments planned for successful firearm elimination project completion. This wasn't neighborhood protection or reasonable concerns. It was a paid scheme to undermine liberties for profit. Text messages uncovered the scheme's specific targeting methods and calculated approach to rights abuse. Diane had specifically requested police-style enforcement to intimidate the veteran into compliance, and was promised ongoing monthly payments for successful contract implementation and continued cooperation. The violations were deliberate, financially motivated, and carefully planned. Troy's business model was becoming crystal clear through intensive federal review and multi-state coordination. His company targeted gun owners in upscale neighborhoods, using manufactured crises and law enforcement impersonation to generate security contracts and ongoing revenue streams. My case was just one operation in a broader criminal enterprise spanning multiple states. The timeline is remarkable in its precision and